Welcome to 2016 Presidential Candidate Interviews. Today I'm interviewing Will Harmer. He's running in the Socialist Party USA. Hello, Mr. Harmer, and welcome to the interview.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for participating in the interview. Let's cut right to the chase and get into some questions.
Yeah.
Why are you running for president?
I'm running for president because I genuinely care about this country. I'm 17 years old, so I'm kind of young for this. But I genuinely care about this country, and I genuinely think that socialism is the best way to do that, to care about this country.
What abilities would you bring to the office of president?
Well, I'm a pretty good researcher. I've been told, by various teachers and friends that I'm a very good researcher. Like, I'm part of the newspaper, and everybody seems amazed by how much information I can gather. So I think I would be very good at producing effective policy for the country overall. And, I understand how government works, I think, to a fairly significant degree. So I could be an effective man for the job, I think.
Are there any presidents you have a positive opinion of who have aspects of their presidency you would want to emulate?
Well, of course, there's always, the big ones like Lincoln, Washington, FDR. One president that I don't think gets a fair rap, at least in some parts, is Lyndon B Johnson, who, he's one of my favorite presidents right now, at least, besides, of course, for Vietnam. Vietnam, of course, was the fiasco of his presidency. But, he was, of course, the person who ended Jim Crow in the South. He was the person who started the war on poverty. He's the person who, made the student loan program. Like, these are amazing things, like the Great Society programs. They're the things that make America what it is today. They're the thing that, keeps equality of opportunity in this country right now. So if there's any president that there's a lot of aspects that I think are very positive, it's probably LBJ, yeah.
Okay. Are there any presidents you have a less than favorable opinion of who have aspects of their presidency you would not want to emulate?
Well, there's George Bush. There's George Bush the First, Bill Clinton, Reagan, Nixon, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of the past presidents, I think,
Right.
There are significant parts that are big failures, including President Obama. Like, he's a good president in some respects, but in other ones, he could have been much better.
Okay. Are there any functions of government you'd like to decrease, abolish?
And when you say decrease, do you mean like budget-wise?
Budget-wise, size-wise, personnel-wise.
Well, I think that we have to reduce the, defense budget, or the war budget. I think defense is kind of, a euphemism. But, like, the War Department should be decreased in funding. Like, I think right now, I forget the statistics, but it's something like, we have more military spending than the next 10 countries combined, most of which are, allies and none of which are enemies. It doesn't make sense when, something like 15% of Americans are living below the poverty line. It doesn't make sense to spend that type of money.
Are there any functions of government you'd like to add to or increase? Add to meaning if it doesn't exist, that it should exist, and increase meaning if it's already in existence, should it be increased?
Yeah, there's several things that I think need to be increased. Like the public schools. They need to be better funded in this country. Like, if you actually look at it right now, I have some things here. Like, take Pennsylvania, for example. In 2011, they had to cut $1 billion from their public school budget to get within reasonable limits. I think that we need to start funding public education more. Like, take Philadelphia as an example. 27% of their public schools had their district's recommended books. Like, it doesn't make... They're recommended books. These are books that, if you want to be successful in school, like, get a good score on an AP exam or anything like that, you, need them. It's, required. And they simply don't have it. Last year in 2014, Philadelphia gave $0 per student for new textbooks. And textbooks are like the fundamental part of doing well on standardized tests. Like, these are things that, there needs to be more federal funding for it. And there's a variety of ways to do that, and grants to states and all that type of stuff. Another thing that needs to be increased is public colleges. Like, right now, 73% of all students attend public universities. And, of course, a lot of them are very well funded. But still, students pay a larger percentage of tuition than state governments or the federal government. That needs to change. I agree with, my fellow presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. Public universities need to be free, flat out, because education is the right of every single American in this country. It's the right of every single person in this country. So that's another area where it needs to be increased. And, of course, another area is welfare funding. Like, the fact today is 3.5 million American children that live in this country right now live on less than $2 a day. Like, just think about how much you paid for lunch today. It's probably more than $2. And these people have to live on $2 a day. These are things that, are going on in our country right now, and we're just not paying attention to them. We need to pay attention to them, and we need to care about the people who need help in this country.
Next question is probably going to answer how you're going to fund this. What's your stance, your approach to taxation?
Yeah, so over the past 30 or so years, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth in this country, and a big part of that is through the federal tax system. We need to return to a tax system where the top income earners pay a significantly larger amount of money in taxes. And when I say that, I mean like people who are making millions or billions of dollars a year need to pay something like 90% tax rates. Now, when we talk about other things like, say, taxing low-income people, I personally think that the first $50,000 in income should be tax-free. That's my position. And it should people who are middle-class Americans, and when I say middle-class, I mean going up to $250,000 a year, they shouldn't be paying 25% of their income in federal income taxes. It doesn't make sense. They're middle-class people. They're trying to live a good life. They should try to do their best to provide for their family, provide for their community. But if you're one of those people who are making, $1 million a year, you have to pay for the opportunity you were given. A lot of these people, they got money when one of their parents died because of the inheritance tax, which of course is, barely anything right now. Something like 98% of Americans don't even pay inheritance tax. And that's something else needs to change too. But they need to pay for their opportunity. People who make $1 million a year, they got an enormous opportunity and they did well on it. Sure, they should keep a large amount of that money, but they have to pay more. And then inheritance taxes, I don't think you should be able to inherit anything above $500,000. I think that should be the limit. Like, you hear about stories of people, I think right now you can get something like $10 million from both of your parents tax-free. You won't pay a nickel in taxes. That has to change. It doesn't make sense for that to happen. Like, America is supposed to be a meritocratic society. We're supposed to, value people on what they contribute to our society. It shouldn't be based on, who your parent is. So, those are two areas. Corporate income taxes, that's another area where we need to focus on. Back in the 1950s, in the so-called golden age of America, besides for black people and women and all the various groups, corporations paid 32% in taxes. They paid 32% of federal income taxes. Today, in the so-called age of hyper-taxation, they pay 10% of federal income taxes. It doesn't make any sense. And then there's a plethora of companies in the Fortune 500 group who they make billions of dollars in profits every year, but they don't pay a nickel in federal taxes. They haven't in years. Like GE in, I think it was 2011 or 2012, they paid a negative 2% income tax. That means they got 2% of their income back, and they made billions of dollars that year. They employ something like 1,000 accountants, tax accountants. That's the reason why they pay so low. We need to reform the the tax code so that it's simplified. And we need to make sure that the richest in our society, the people who had the most opportunity when they, in the society, pay for the opportunity they used. That's what we need to make sure. And we need to make sure that lower income people, poor people, working people, have a fair chance in the society, that they can go up in society, that they can get the American dream. That's what I believe in by way of taxes.
Okay. Next topic, not related. Describe your stance on the abortion pro-choice issue.
Something like 67% of Americans, according to the latest Bloomberg poll, I am firmly pro-choice. And I also happen to believe in publicly funded abortions. I think that is, that's along with 57% of Americans, as found a Gallup poll in 2011, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And I support abortion because you have a right over your own body, and you have a right to do whatever you want with your body. That's why I think the drug war is also effective.
Is there ever a point in a pregnancy where you think an abortion should not be legal?
I generally support the current law relating to, when you can get an abortion. But I think generally it's as soon as the fetus can live independent of the mother, like when you can, take it out of the womb, you can support it in any other way, that should be the limit. And then the federal government should offer to support that child in, all the medical needs as soon as it can live outside the confines of the mother.
Okay. Another question, not related to the previous one. How would you handle immigration and border security?
Well, I believe in open borders. I believe that if you want to come to America and you want to make this country a better place, there should be basically only one limit on it. You should you should be able to enroll in a free English class, like basic English, so that you understand the rest of society. But beyond that, I don't see there being any reason besides for excluding violent criminals. There should be no reason why anybody should be denied entry into the United States. If you want to make this country better, and if you want to be an American, you should be able to be one.
Okay. How do you perceive the issues of race and discrimination in the country, and do you think we still face challenges?
Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious to anybody that that racism is still is still a problem in this country. I have some statistics here, like take for example callbacks. Just in you're applying for a job and you have a white sounding name like say Emily, and you have a black sounding name like Lakeisha Jamal.
Okay.
The white sounding name will get on average 50% more callbacks than the black-sounding name. And that's according to a study done by the University of Chicago, not some radical left-wing group. That's a simple area where black people have a systemic disadvantage. Another area is, the pay gap between well-qualified black employees and white employees. Northwestern University did a brilliant study recently where they found that the average black worker will get 10% less in pay compared to their fellow white worker. And that's controlling for education, prior experience, and everything like that. Those are areas where racism blatantly exists. You just have to look at the facts and think about it for a moment. It's very simple. And then there's things like household wealth, with black families typically having $11,000 in household wealth compared to the average white family, which has $141,000. It's very obvious that there's racism in this country.
Okay. You've probably already answered this a little bit, but what role should the federal government play in healthcare? And I think we're going to know the answer, but go ahead anyway.
Yeah. I support a single-payer national healthcare program. And, there's a bunch of reasons for that. Of course, there's always the reason that, it's the fundamentally right thing to do to care for people who need healthcare. But, even if you don't care about that, let's say, you truly just don't care about whether poor people get health care or not. It's simply a better fiscal way of doing it. This is from a study made by the Physicians for a National Healthcare Program, so a little biased. But, instituting it first year, we would save nearly $600 billion. There's no reason why Americans should have to pay $600 billion more every year to a private healthcare system. A study done by a less biased group, BMC Health Services Research, and that was this year. The United States would save nearly $400 billion. 95% of American households would pay less in a single-payer healthcare service, and they would deliver the same care or even better. That's like according to the World Health Organization that actually studies these things. They find consistently that the American healthcare system, the way that we do it today, private healthcare system, it simply doesn't work. We get poor outcomes and we pay double as much. It doesn't make any sense.
Next question on infrastructure. What priority would you give repair of infrastructure, and what role should the federal government have in maintaining infrastructure?
I believe in the role that's prescribed to it in the Constitution. The federal government is responsible for, roads, infrastructure in general, bridges, all that type of stuff. And if you just look at the information right now, American roads get a D- grade from the American Society of Civil Engineers. Flat out, we're not funding them right now. And this could also be a win-win for the economy, too. It doesn't have to be a drag on it. Their fellow candidate, Bernie Sanders, says that we should spend $1 trillion over 10 years on repairing American infrastructure. And that can be a variety of things. That can be, fixing roads right now. That can be extending the road system right now to include more people in it. And that can be, laying down internet cables to connect, I think it's like 40% of Kentuckians who don't have access to high-speed internet or normal internet, something that's not dial-up. This can be a massive social good for society if we just spend on infrastructure and we expand things like trains, things like roads, things like internet connection, so that we develop a strong economy.
Okay. Next question is on personal privacy and intelligence. Some people think there is a conflict of interest between maintaining personal rights and liberties and the right of privacy and then gathering intelligence to prevent a terrorist attack. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a conflict of interest, and how would you handle this kind of delicate balance between two very, very important things?
Okay, well, there's the Constitution has a lot to say on this. If you want to look at somebody's personal information, you have to get a warrant. If you want to go into someone's house, you have to get a warrant. So things like the NSA spying program where, they collect all Americans' data are blatantly unconstitutional. Just read the Constitution and look at the program and you can see it straight out. And not only that, but those programs are not effective. The intelligence agencies like the CIA, the FBI, all those types of stuff, they can't point to any single, totally organic terrorist plot that was thwarted by things like these programs that people talk about. So I think in the realm of personal privacy that we have to protect the right of privacy. And, of course there is some, there is a problem. You have to balance personal privacy and security. But that line is laid out in the Constitution. You have to look at the Constitution for these things. You have to protect the right to privacy, and within protecting the right to privacy, protecting that fundamental civil liberty, you also have to protect security. And I think the Constitution does that well. It worked for, the history of this country. I think it still works.
Next question is kind of a sensitive topic for some, but it matters to a very large amount of voters, a good percentage of voters. What role does faith, religion, spirituality, etc. play in your life, and what type of role would it play for you as president? This is not a litmus test. It's just one of those things that does matter to some voters.
Well, I'm not at all a religious man. I'm actually an atheist. So
okay.
That probably answers that question well enough. But, it's important that we look at history in this. People like Abraham Lincoln, for a large part of his life at least, I don't think during his presidency, but he was a deist. He didn't believe in, Christianity or any of the other religions. Thomas Jefferson didn't believe in Christianity. George Washington refused communion. John Adams didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. Like, religiosity should not play a role. That's what I'm saying. And just because I'm an atheist does not mean I don't have a personal morality. I think that you have to care for your brother in need. I like the line, be your brother's keeper.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question. Be a forecaster of sorts. Predict maybe one or two problems facing our country in the future that few people are talking about, or maybe no one's talking about. What would you do to prepare America for it or those things?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. It's not like nobody's talking about this issue, but a very important issue that I think we have to increasingly pay attention to is, campaign finance reform, and how increasingly today, nothing gets passed without, the top 1%, signing off on it. And that's getting increasingly worse. Something like 95% of Senate races, the person with more money won. And in most of those cases, a single, a small group of top 1% donors outweighed all the small donors and, that gave to that campaign. And when you have that type of stuff happening, you increasingly see the American government not be democratic. It's increasingly not passing legislation that we all support. There was a recent poll done by, I forgot who, but it found that 51% of Americans support a Medicare for all. It supports, basically single-payer universal health care, just by a different name. Consistently, both Republicans and Democrats support a much higher minimum wage. Maybe not $15, but a much higher minimum wage. These types of things, these aren't going to get passed unless the government is democratic. And the only way to make sure that we're democratic in this country is by doing things like publicly funding elections. And that's something that I think needs to be talked about more. It should be the top issue in this election, I think. But it's not going to be, of course, because, variety of reasons. But that's an issue that we really need to pay more attention to. That and child poverty. Child poverty is also something that people should talk about more. And it might get worse in future years depending on how things go.
Getting near the end here, everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses. Everybody has things they're good at, things they're not so good at. What are some of your weaknesses, maybe some of the things you're not so good at, and what would you do to compensate for those? Of course, one of my weaknesses, and that strains from how old I am, I don't really have that much experience managing things. So that, of course, would be a disadvantage. But, I already mentioned one of my major good things is I'm a very good researcher. I genuinely like looking at policy and finding out what the best policy is in this country. And, that type of stuff. And the way that I would outweigh my lack of experience is I would hope to have, very good advisors with me. I would want to appoint probably Joseph Stiglitz, Paul Krugman, and what's his name? I forgot. He came out with the movie Inequality for All, which is a great movie. He was Bill Clinton's labor secretary for a bit. Those are people that I would want to appoint. Robert Reich? No, not Reich.
Yeah, Robert Reich. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, I would like to appoint those types of people to my administration. And all of those people, they have very good experience both in all their respective fields of labor rights and economics. And, people like Robert Reich, they have genuine management experience. He was labor secretary. There's a large amount of people in this country who are good people who favor socialism in this country, and they can easily manage how this country works. They're sometimes called sewer socialists. Those are typically mayors. But socialists, when they get to elected office, they typically perform extremely well in what they need to do. Take Bernie Sanders when he was mayor of Burlington. People liked him because he was able to keep taxes low, and he was able to improve city services. There's a great amount of good socialists in this country who can perform the jobs that need to be done and administer right. And I would heavily rely on them helping me with my lack of experience.
And are there any other issues you would like to discuss that have not been covered by the questions asked?
One of the issues that both you didn't ask specifically about and needs to be a bigger focus in this campaign is child poverty. Like something like 22% of American children right now live in poverty. That's an atrocity. It doesn't make sense for the richest country on earth right now, the country with the largest economy, to have more than 1 in 5 kids live in poverty. And when you have that, you can't realistically expect equality of opportunity. I'm not talking about equality of results. I'm not a communist. I'm talking about just everybody getting the same opportunity when they're born. That's what I want. Other issues like the pharmaceutical industry. Like there's been a plethora of stories in recent times, in recent weeks, where they talk about how people will buy say drugs like diaphragm or diaprim. Forgot the exact name, but it was used to treat a very serious issue, paralysis, in mainly pregnant women, cancer patients, and AIDS patients. And when this guy bought it, he has a weird name, and I truly hate him as a person. He bought the drug when it was $13.50 a pill, and the company was still making a large amount of profit. Like even a couple years before that, it was $1 pill, and the company was still making profit off of it. But he raised it to $750 per pill. That's the type of stuff that needs to end. That type of stuff is outrageous, because that means that people might go blind, they might, lose feeling throughout their body, just because this guy wanted to make a couple extra bucks, well, not a couple extra bucks, a lot of extra bucks in his life. That's one of the things that I think, if I was elected president, I would want to do is look into nationalizing the top pharmaceutical corporations in this country. Take Pfizer, which in one quarter in 2013 posted a 42% profit margin. And that's expected to be the new norm because of the aging population. That is the type of stuff that needs to stop in this country. You shouldn't be able to grow that rich over people getting sick. Something that happens to everybody. It's just outrageous. It doesn't make any sense. There's so many things that don't make any sense in the way that the United States does things right now, and they just need to change.
Okay. Time for some closing remarks. In 2 minutes or less, tell us why we should vote for you.
Well, ideally, I would hope that you vote for me because you believe in what I'm saying. You believe that poverty is a major issue in this country right now, where you believe that, people, like nearly 2 million people declaring bankruptcy every year is because of medical bills, is outrageous. Where you find it outrageous that something like 45,000 people die every year because they can't afford medical care. Like, I want you to vote for me because you think that those things are outrageous and you want them to change. And I don't mean change in the Obama sense where we do, a couple, like barely anything to it. I mean systemic change where these things end, where these things don't happen anymore, where, people can live a decent life when they follow all the good rules and they live a good moral life. I want the average American to be able to live his life in comfort and to be able to provide for his family and to make sure that his children have opportunity and make sure that everything runs well in this country. That's what I want. And if you believe in those things, I would hope that you vote for me because you think that I have the right solutions to that.
Thank you for participating in the interview. Thank you to my listeners for listening. Be sure to check back in the future for more candidate interviews. Have a good day, and remember to keep informed and keep involved.